In a sense, we have covered a group of weevils. Now that the bark beetles and ambrosia beetles are included in the Curculionidae, I should probably make changes to the module names. In this module, we'll cover several classic weevils, those beetles with distinctive snouts that burrow into trees and shrubs. There are also a few other beetles that are important borers. There are a couple of shoot-boring bark beetles, which are often called twig beetles. Another commonly overlooked beetle family are the lizard beetles. These elongate, often brightly colored beetles are commonly seen visiting flowers, but their larvae are missed. The larvae commonly burrow into the stems of perennial flowers. The white pine weevil is a very common pest of conifers in northern North America. The pest attacks the leaders, that is, the top shoot, of conifers. While its name suggests that white pine is attacked, the weevil is also known as the Sitka spruce weevil in the Pacific Northwest. This weevil overwinters as adults in the needle litter under host trees. In early spring, the weevils move to the upper leaders and feed by making punctures through the bark. After mating, the female moves to the bottom of the leader and makes a series of punctures around the base of the leader through the bark. Clear sap soon flows from these holes, and the purpose apparently is to reduce sap flow to the top of the leader. The female then moves to the top of the leader and chews more holes in the bark. If sap doesn't flow, she will insert an egg or two into each puncture. The tiny white legless grubs hatch and feed on the phloem and cambium while moving down the leader. This soon causes the top shoots to wilt. The larvae continue to burrow down the leader, molting several times. Their location can often be determined by how the bark of the leader looks. Where the larvae have bored, the bark will be slightly sunken and discolored. The adult beetles can lay eggs from mid-March through April, and females can lay eggs in multiple leaders. By mid to late June, the larvae will be about a half-inch long. Upon maturing, the larvae excavate cavities into the xylem layer. During this process, they produce long white shavings which line and cover the pupal chamber. The chambers are known as chip cocoons. After 2 or 3 weeks of pupation, the new adults chew their way out of the chip cocoon and overlying bark. They make round exit holes that are about 2 millimeters in diameter. As stated before, the white pine weevil seems to prefer white pine, but Colorado and Sitka spruces are also favored. In fact, this weevil has been found attacking Scotch, pitch, and black pines. I even found it once in a mugo pine. It will also attack all the spruce species and occasionally will attack true firs and Douglas fir. In spruces, the damaged leaders can be pruned out and a new leader trained by pulling up a lateral branch and holding it up by using a string or thick rubber bands. I prefer rubber bands because these will become brittle in the sun and break away after the new leader has been trained. Unfortunately, if the larvae haven't been caught before they reach the first whorl of pine trees, a branch from the second whorl will have to be trained, and this is difficult to do with hardened and brittle older branches. Notice the close-up of a chip cocoon with the thread-like pieces and the larva exposed by pulling these aside. In tree plantations, white pine weevil is regularly sprayed for in March and April, targeting the adult females. In landscapes, systemic neonicotinoids can be applied in November as a root drench to protect the trees the following spring. Technically, the Paley's weevil doesn't burrow into living pine trees. It only attacks pine or spruce trunks or stems that are less than 1 year of death at the time that the females lay eggs in March and early April. Both males and females overwinter in the litter under trees, and they may become active in late February through March, depending on the temperatures. When warm enough, the females locate trees that were recently killed from vascular disease or bark beetle attack. Of course, they will also utilize the stumps of cut Christmas trees or pine trees cut down in woodlots and simply left behind. The larvae feed in the sapwood and finish their development by June. They then pupate and the new adults emerge in July. Newly emerged adults maturation feed to build up fat bodies in order to successfully overwinter. They feed on the green bark of living conifers. This can girdle small branches, which causes major flagging. The poplar and willow borer, which is a weevil, seems to attack willow more than poplar in spite of what its name suggests. The larvae first burrow in the cambium area, which initiates gouty growth on small trees and branches. The pest seems to have a varied life history that often spans several years. Larvae that started feeding in August and September can overwinter in branches and trunks of its host trees. In late spring, the larvae finish their feeding within the distorted growth that was initiated the previous season. The larvae push out frass from their entrance burrow as they grow. The larvae may not develop together, and pupation can occur in May through July, just under the bark. The adults emerge, feed on thin bark and leaf bases, mate, and females attach eggs to cracks and fissures in the bark. Larvae that hatch in June apparently can enter a diapause and may not resume feeding until the following spring. Late emerging adults can overwinter and lay eggs the following spring. The larval burrowing and formation of gouty growths make the affected tree branches and trunks susceptible to breakage in wind and ice storms. The Palmetto Weevil is a very large species that used to be the only weevil in North America that would attack palms. The adults are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in length and are usually dark orange with black markings, but some individuals are completely black. This native of eastern subtropical North America is found from southern South Carolina across to the coastal areas of Texas. In Florida, it was usually considered a curiosity that would attack severely stressed or dying palms. It began attacking cultivated palms in Florida nurseries, especially Canary date, Bismarck, and Latan palms. Adults may be found almost any time during the year, but are most common during the warmer months. Females lay eggs in the bases of leaf stems of stressed or dying palms. The eggs hatch in a few days, and the larvae burrow to the interior of the palm to feed for 4 to 5 weeks. They then chew their way to the outer rim of the bark, where they construct a pupal chamber using palm fibers. The pupae take about 2 weeks to finish development. Adults can remain in the pupal chambers during cool months or emerge immediately in the summer. Adults can live for several weeks to several months, depending on weather conditions and moisture. Another one of the giant palm weevils is the red palm weevil. This species is a native of tropical Asian countries, but it has been spread around the world, where it is a major pest of coconut, date, and oil palms. This pest has also established itself in Southern California and Arizona. The adults chew holes in the bases of palm leaves, especially in the crown area. If the female determines that the host is correct, she will place an egg in the feeding hole. She often will lay up to 200 eggs. The larvae take 2 to 3 months to develop, pupate, and emerge as new adults. Where this pest has been established, it does major damage to young palm trees, primarily in plantations. Damage first appears as a wilting of the crown and leaves drooping and often breaking off. The European pine shoot beetle was discovered in Ohio in the early 1990s in a northwestern Christmas tree plantation. When discovered, the USDA Forest Service immediately imposed a quarantine to stop movement of pine trees from the infested area to other counties and states. The thought was that this beetle poses a significant risk of greatly slowing the growth of hard pines, especially if it got into the southern pine regions. It is the adult beetle that causes the flagging after it emerges in spring. It does an unusual maturation feeding routine that involves burrowing into small diameter pine shoots and feeding on the sapwood. The adult entering a shoot causes pitch to flow from the wound, and frass pellets are added to the mass. The bored-out shoot often flags and turns brown by midsummer. This can ruin Christmas trees when several shoots have turned brown, and these will be evident at the time of normal Christmas tree harvest. The pine shoot beetle overwinters as adults that hide in old burrows and in old needle duff under pine trees. In early spring, the adults emerge and seek recently cut trees, or they may use the stumps of cut pine trees in Christmas tree plantations. These stumps can be in abundance in those plantations, but cleared woodlots can provide plenty of fresh cut pine material. Pairs of beetles chew out a nuptial chamber, and the female deposits eggs along the side of the chamber like most bark beetles. The larvae feed in the cambium region and take 6 to 10 weeks to complete their development. They then pupate and emerge through small, round holes. The new adults perform the previously described maturation feeding during the summer months, and each beetle can mine out 5 to 6 shoots before seeking overwintering sites. I've included the USDA APHIS quarantine map to show how quarantines can affect plant movement. Basically, it is illegal to move any pine tree or freshly cut logs outside of the red zone without getting a permit. Permits can be obtained if a pine tree grower or logger has followed a preventive control program or has had the material inspected just before transport out of the quarantine zone. Our last beetle borer will be the lizard beetles. These pests are in a small family, and most of the adults are slender in shape and have shiny black with red or orange markings. The adults commonly feed on pollen in composite flowers. Little is known of their life cycles, but the larvae are commonly found burrowing in the stems of perennial flowers, especially composites and legumes like clover and alfalfa. The females insert eggs into host plant stems, and the larvae burrow into the pithy middles of these stems. This doesn't stop plant growth, but the weak stems can break, or rot diseases can invade the entry holes. This can result in early death of parts of these perennial plants. Well, this concludes our discussion of the beetles and weevils that are borers. Now let's move on and review the caterpillar borers. Many of the boring beetle larvae can be plump and elongate. This can make them look a little like a caterpillar, but if you turn them over, it is obvious that they don't have prolegs. The caterpillars that bore into plants retain their prolegs, even though the prolegs may be very short. In some cases, the presence of the crochet hooks on the abdominal segments are the best feature to determine if you are dealing with a beetle or caterpillar. We will find that the clearwing borers are the largest group, with larvae that burrow in branches, trunks, and root flares. These often burrow under the cover of their host bark, and only some sap or pitch flow may disclose their activity. The carpenterworms are the larvae of white and black spotted leopard moths. These attack a wide range of hardwoods. There are quite a few pyralids that have larvae that burrow in tree trunks, but most burrow down tree and shrub shoots. Finally, there are quite a few of those tortricid moths that also have larvae that burrow into shoots and stems. There are many species of clearwing moths found across North America, and almost 2,000 species are found worldwide. The Ceciad moths are called clearwings because most species have only the veins covered with scales. The membranes between the longitudinal veins are clear. The vast majority of clearwing moths appear to be wasp and hornet mimics. The oak borer adult shown here really can fool you into thinking that it is a yellow jacket. Others are often iridescent blue-black in color with yellow or orange markings. These can look like parasitic wasps. The adults fly during the daytime hours. The larvae have very short prolegs, but each proleg has a pair of half-circle shaped crochets. The larvae also lack pigmented spots, which are seen on the leopard moth caterpillars and pyralid moth caterpillars. The family Cocidae is a relatively small group, but the moths are often very large. The Carpenterworm moth female can be nearly 2 inches long and has a very heavy body. I often wonder how these things can fly, but they do often show up in my light traps and under night lights. The robust larvae are pretty nondescript other than they have crochets, so they must be caterpillars and not a longhorn beetle larva. The crochets appear to consist of 2 nearly parallel rows of hooks per proleg. Carpenter worms attack a wide array of deciduous trees, and their large larvae generally bore into the xylem and push out granular frass from their burrows. Larvae can take 1 to 3 years to develop, and repeated attacks can weaken the structure of trees, causing breakage. The family Pyralidae is a very large one with many species that have larvae that burrow into plants. The famous European corn borer is probably the most well known. In trees and shrubs, the Zimmerman pine moth and maple shoot borers are good examples of this family. The adult moths have forward-projecting maxillary palps, and the wings are held in a triangle shape over the body, or the wings are slightly folded around the body. The larvae are characterized by having many rows of dark sclerotized spots, each with hairs arising from them. These sclerotized areas can be small and circular, or larger square patches. We have already seen that there are a large number of tortricid moths that have larvae that roll and tie leaves together. In this section, we'll find that many also have larvae that burrow into plant buds, shoots, and stems. The moths can be variously colored, but most are less than a ½ inch in length. Likewise, their small larvae generally lack stripes or spots, which pyralids or noctuids have. Species identification of larvae usually requires consulting with an expert who can look at cetal patterns on the thorax and first abdominal segments.